Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you in another video. All right, so I would love to tell you guys that I have it all together as pertains to the Lakers schedule that was released yesterday, but I only have this one device, so I can either record or look at the schedule. So I got to go off memory, and a few things stood out in regards to this schedule. But I think the overall thought for me is this is a schedule that is good. It's better than last year's schedule as it pertains to difficulty and travel. I think it's more player and coach and team friendly than it necessarily is fan friendly. And maybe I'd imagine the team feels the same angst that I would feel about this schedule, in a sense that you keep playing the same teams over and over again. It's going to feel that way. You're going to play Sacramento 3 times in a matter of like 2 weeks. You got a weird back-to-back sequence where you see Milwaukee, Denver at the end of a road trip. Then you see a random team, maybe like the Rockets or something like that. Then you see Milwaukee, Denver again, all in a matter of like 2 weeks. So, and you got the in-season tournament, which provides more of what it is we're talking about. You're going to see the same teams over and over again, same 4 teams. They have, of course, we talked about the Christmas Day. It was Golden State. That game is in Golden State. And it's an interesting point in the schedule as well, because between, if I'm not mistaken, mid-December to early January, we're only in the state of California, which is great, but on Christmas Day, we'll be in Golden State. So it's like, you gave us the holidays at home, but on the holiday, we're not at home. So I don't know how Laker fans are going to feel about that, or whether the team was going to feel about that, because you're in California, but you got a back-to-back in Sacramento, meaning that you got to play Sacramento in their house twice in a row, which is irritating as hell. And then you go back home for the Christmas game or something like that, and you stick around and play a bunch of home games, a home stand, or rather not home for a Christmas game, but of course the Golden State for the Christmas game after you come back home. It's like you go to Sacramento 2 games, come back down here for a game, go back up to Golden State on Christmas, come back down here for 3 games or something like that. I think that's how that goes. So you're in California for a long time, which is a good thing, but it's not home California. You're on the road California, which means you're spending a lot of time in the Bay Area, Sacramento area. I don't love that for the team. I think it's more favorable for the schedule makers, but it's not necessarily us home. You're still flying around, not long flights, but you're not at home. You're in a hotel. Either way, so yeah, it's a weird kind of break in the schedule there. We get our Miami road game and our Cleveland road game out the way very early in the schedule, which is what they usually do, because they don't know if LeBron's going to make it through the season at his age. So they try to get those games out the way early most years. That's something that I've noticed. Toronto is going to be out the way before the end of November, which is absolutely strange how they didn't spread that out. But we played them twice in the first couple of weeks. That's how they did us last year with the Magic. We played them twice in the first couple of weeks. So they're out the way early. We don't see Chicago to the very end of the season. Like, I'm talking like the last 3 weeks of the season, we'll see both of the Chicago games. We have 5 different sequences where we play the same team back-to-back. 5. One with San Antonio, one with Utah, the Sacramento one I already told you about. I forget who the other 2 were. The Clippers, we got a Clipper back-to-back. We played them twice in a row. Same floor. I think it's really strange how that's going to be super repetitive. And I forget the other team, but we'll see them as well back to back. I think it's Utah, if I didn't already mention them. So yeah, it's a repetitive schedule, man. You're seeing the same couple of teams in clusters. It's almost like baseball in some ways, where you see like same team over and over again and you move on to a different series type thing. It's going to feel that way. It's like, damn, didn't we just see them last week? Yes, you did. You're going to see them again too, and you're going to see them next week as well. So they have a lot of clusters in that vein. What else stands out? There's a few other things that stood out in this schedule for me. can't. My mind's gone blank. But at the end of the day, I think the schedule was easier than last year because it spreads out your road games a little bit, but you still have plenty of them in the first half of the season, so you can spend some time at home on the road at the end of the season. But we do have a road trip right before the end of the season, just like last year. So we will be on the road, like a 4 or 5 game road trip at the end. Yeah, but the way they set up the Denver's games to where we're seeing Milwaukee and then we play Denver on the second of a back-to-back twice out of the 4 times that we played them, and it's in a cluster of like a week and a half, that's like brutal as hell, man. For us to have to deal with Giannis and then deal with Jokic on the back-to-back, those scheduled losses, man. You can almost schedule us for like 4 losses right there. I wanted to double back to the Clippers because we don't see them at all until like January 21st, and then we play them 4 times over the next like 2 months or 3 months, however that goes. And as I said, you got the 2 Laker home games. If I'm not mistaken, the 2 games that are in our building are back-to-back. Is that how that goes? Or is it home-to-home? I think the first game we play the Clippers on the 25th, I believe it is our building. And I think the second time we see them is our building again, and then the next back-to-back we'll do it in Inglewood, and then we'll see them again like 3 weeks later in Inglewood. I think that's how that works. It's kind of surprising because one would think that they would put the Inglewood game early. If anything, you would think that would be the first game of the season, like the big opening of their building. But I think also they might have thought the idea that maybe it would be a good idea not to put the Laker game because it's a Clipper arena. And if you make the first game in the Clippers arena a Laker game, it's going to be a Laker crowd in theory. So they probably just want to let the Clipper fans have their Clipper moment against a non-LA team first, enjoy their building a very long time throughout the course of the season before having that Laker crowd come in and ultimately take over the building. I think that's kind of what the schedule makers were thinking, rather than to make it a premier type of game like I probably would have did, have it as the first game of the season, Clipper home game, let's open the building with a bang. They thought otherwise. So I think that's a little anticlimactic when you consider what that game could mean for both teams. Clippers finally have their own building again since the 80s, basically, or however long it's been since they've been in the sports arena. So, I personally think the schedule is friendly at the end of the day. It's not a particularly difficult, quote-unquote, schedule. I haven't looked at other teams' schedules at all. I haven't even glanced at anybody else's schedule, so I don't know where it compares to other teams' schedules, but I don't find it to be particularly difficult. But I will always tell people, you don't at all know what these teams are going to be. A lot of times we go into the season thinking the team's going to be this, thinking the team is going to be that, and they end up being sorry, and vice versa in regards to teams that you think are going to be sorry. They end up being good, and suddenly a not-so-difficult schedule turned into a difficult one because a team that you thought was going to suck is really good. That happened last year with us, and I think it was a few teams. I think it was the Timberwolves we probably thought was okay, ended up being a contender, that kind of thing. So, yeah. We see the Rockets 3 times this season. We see Oklahoma City 3 times this season. But we also have Oklahoma City in our division, so it'll still give us the 4 times we end up seeing them or more. So, officially, we see Oklahoma 3 times and Rockets 3 times. I think that's good. For a Western Conference team, you don't want to play Oklahoma City officially any more than that. You don't want to play them too much this season. I have them pegged in as probably the first or second best team in the Western Conference this year. So the fewer times we play them, the better. And the Rockets, I think, are a much improved basketball team as well, so you don't want to play them too much. What else? We see Boston in the second half of the season. I think once in January, once in February, something like that. We don't see them too early. And, I personally am going to think it will become repetitive. That's what this schedule looks like to me. Very, very repetitive. Not a fan of that. Now, when it comes to the playoffs, you definitely don't mind. Because in the playoffs, you're strategizing to see the same team 4 or more times. You have gone through the season where you've seen everybody. You're playing for something, so it feels right. You don't find yourself frustrated by playing the same team over and over again. In the regular season, I don't want to see Sacramento 3 times in 2 weeks. I really, really don't. So that's something I just wanted to say. I don't particularly like how it's structured as it pertains to you're going to see the same teams over and over again, and you're going to feel like you literally just saw this team last week. Here we go again with this team. And that happens throughout the course of the entire season, where you're like, damn, them again, damn, them again, damn, them again. It's just, we're going to say that so much more than we've probably ever said it, ever. It's just, I think the NBA has fallen in love with these home and homes, or the play this 2 teams back-to-back crap. I would love for that to go away. I think it has something to do with the in-season tournament scheduling and how they have to make that equate. But I personally hate it a lot. I'm just going to be honest with you. Seeing the Clippers back-to-back, seeing Sacramento back-to-back, Utah back-to-back, I hate it, man. I think what makes it somewhat acceptable is the alternate floors and alternate jerseys, so you can kind of feel like you're playing a different team. Like when we played San Antonio last year, they had such different contrasts in what they were wearing to where it didn't even feel like we were in the same building. But still, you don't. I don't. Maybe you feel differently. I don't like repetitive schedules. I'd like to have. I don't want to play the same team more than once every 4 weeks if I could have a choice. I only want to see I want to see such a variety of teams, and that's kind of why, in a perfect world for me, we would see the Eastern Conference teams more. We would get 3 games against the Eastern Conference and shave off a game from maybe 2 or 3 more Western Conference teams. I think that would be more to my liking. I don't know if that makes sense schedule-wise or, flight-wise. You got to make that make sense in regards to travel. But for me, I would much rather see the Hawks 3 times, Charlotte 3 times, Boston 3 times, New York 3 times, and then shave a game off Sacramento, shave a game off of Timberwolves, shave a game off of the Rock, that kind of thing. That's what I prefer. Give us a little more balance. I personally think that would provide more of a balance in regards to defining who's better and who's not. As we talked about a lot last season, Eastern Conference teams play Eastern Conference teams over and over and over again, obviously, as Western Conference teams do. But what I'm trying to say is it's an easier conference most years. So that means that in order for you to make the playoffs, you play against a lesser difficulty than the Western Conference consistently every year, until y'all teams build up themselves and make themselves competitive, which I think Eastern Conference teams are slowly but surely doing. But until they get to a point where they're as good as the West has a much harder path to making the playoffs. And the other aspect of that is important is you also have more testing coming to Western Conference way because of it. That's pretty much my thought in regards to we're tested more because we play more difficult teams. Even the bottom teams are difficult because they're used to playing against higher level teams on a regular basis. So it's almost like one conference is playing on superstar difficulty and the other conference is playing on normal difficulty. You know what I'm saying? If you shave off some of that and bring more 3-game seasons, 3-game pairings from West interconference pairings, you cut some of that out in theory. Let Denver play Charlotte 3 times. Let the Knicks play the Denver Nuggets 3 times. Whatever, you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say to you. And see, don't the gap close on how much competitive you can expect Eastern Conference teams to play, and how much easier it is to define who's best amongst both conferences. Because if the Boston Celtics had to play the Denver Nuggets 3 times and they lost all 3 of those games, it affects that schedule over there. It affects the entire Eastern Conference playoff picture. It affects everything, is what I'm trying to express. not the schedule, but more so affects the playoff picture and ultimately how good Boston defines itself to be. When they get to play Charlotte, they get to play the Hawks, they get to play Orlando, even though Orlando's much improved. They get to play the weak Eastern Conference teams over and over again, and then they fly up to like a 60-win season. And they just end up being better than everybody else, play a weak Eastern Conference playoff picture, and then find themselves waltzing through the finals. Because Western Conference teams beat each other up, and Dallas just happened to be the last team standing. They weren't even the best team in the West, and we know it. But they happened to win the series against Minnesota and didn't have to win to Denver. So it's one of those situations where it's like, if we can somehow close the gap on that, I think you'll get a more definition of who actually the better team was at the end of the season holding the championship in the end. When the East has to play more of the West to get more competitive games in during the regular season, so they're not waltzing into these easy Eastern Conference games that end up being bad to watch and bad to play. And then the Western Conference gets a little more of a break because they get to play some of those weak Eastern Conference teams a bit more to influence more balance on the side of the Western Conference, and with wins accredited to us that we likely would deserve if there was more parity in regards to the schedule from conference to conference. So I hope what I'm saying is articulated correctly. I just think that some of them 4-game matchups, interconference matchups, should be shaved to 3, and then bring in more cross-conference matchups to make it more sense. I think I say that correctly. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, but you get the point. Should play each other more in between conferences. And I think it'll probably be more fun to watch for a lot of teams. And then just fluctuate who plays each other 3 times in the East from year to year to year, so you don't have the same repetitive situation happen where the same teams are playing each other 3 times every year. That switch it up like football does in regards to who plays who. The way they do it is you may not see a team for 3 or 4 years in the NFL. You know, that's how that goes. So that's how I would structure the 3-game series between a West and an Eastern Conference team. So yeah, this is a thought that came to mind right now as I'm sitting here thinking about how repetitive the NBA schedule is. It wouldn't be as repetitive if we did it that way. And I think another way that can make that make sense, so that travel can be cost effective or make more sense, or whatever the case. Not cost effective, maybe, but make more sense, is do it in a third party's place. You know, I know that that's not going to be very popular because obviously each American arena has a certain quota they'd like to make and expect to make, given 51 games in each, not 51 games, or however many games it is, 41 games in each building. But in my scenario, that third game would be somewhere else. That third game would be in Mexico City, likely somewhere overseas. Japan, Mexico, anywhere, France. I would put that game, the third game, cross-conference game, or whatever they call that. Is it interconference? I don't actually know the word. But 2 teams that are from different conferences playing one another, that third game would be somewhere else, bro. And then what we would do is structure it so that a flurry of those games would be played in that city, so that it wouldn't be so much flying around. You see what I'm saying? It would be like, okay, we got the cluster in Mexico City, 7 games, interconference play or cross-conference play, whatever the proper word is. This game's at 4:30 on this day, the next game's at 7:30 this day, or whatever. Do it that way, and then we would tour around the country or around the world or whatever with 7-game clusters of the third game kind, so to speak, if that makes sense. So yeah, man, if the NBA ends up doing something like that, you know where you heard it first, because it's coming straight from my head. Like I said, I don't know how this will work numbers-wise. I know there would be some pushback from the owners who own these buildings, but I think if you work this into the equation where more teams are playing each other cross-conference, you'll get more parity and more exposure by doing it in a third place overseas to the international markets, which is something I know the NBA is very serious about. So, yeah, that would be something I would tell the NBA to explore, man. since you already do games like that anyway, you have like 2 games in France, 2 games in Mexico. Just do it this way. Think or consider it is what I'm trying to say. You can even call it a tournament if you want, but I think the idea is to just make it so that the East has more competitive games to play, and that the West isn't beating each other up, playing so many damn competitive games, then getting worn down because of it, and then not being able to stand upright at the end of the season, which is something that we're actually seeing, in my humble opinion. I really think that's happening. So yeah, man, that's my little take on things, man. Wish I had the schedule in front of me in regards to the Lakers so I can give you more of an understanding of what it is that makes sense in regards to the specifics of who we're playing and how it goes. You know, we will try to stay healthy, I guess is what I'll say. I'm very thankful there ain't too many back-to-backs. They do have some back-to-backs, but I don't think nearly as many as it was last year for us. So hopefully that equates to us having less scheduled losses, so to speak. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say. So I hope everybody's enjoying their day. Can't wait for August to be over. Season starts, I believe, the end of October. So we're a little more than 2 months away from real tip-off. I think the preseason probably starts at like October 4th or something like that, October 7th, somewhere in that week. So we're closer than we think in regards to seeing basketball. So I hope all of our players are enjoying their summer. Guys in Tahiti somewhere, living it up, enjoying their money, and eating right, because that's going to make a difference, of course, and getting ready for the season, man. It should be a good season for a lot of teams. Hopefully we're one of them. BDL 44. I thank you all for watching.